Fire Emblem has always been a quite lore-heavy series. Sure, some games put more focus on it, to the point it borderline becomes a selling point, like free houses, while others consider it more a background element, like several older titles. But all games do put effort in to create a world that has history and feels lived in. And that effort has been put in ever since the series was first created, all the way back on the Famicom in 1990. Because yeah, duh, of course we need to go back to Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light to talk about the oldest hidden lore Fire Emblem has ever had. Introducing one of Archanea's most enigmatic locations, one that the game merely teases a grander history of, and one that you would be completely forgiven for having forgotten about, the Pyrathi Islands. Since I can imagine not all of you know the chapter by chapter story of Shadow Dragon like the back of your hand, and the fact this chapter was cut from Mystery of the Emblem, further adding to its elusive status, allow me to bring up the context of the only ever chapter that sees us visit the Pyrathi Islands. Chapter 9, appropriately titled The Pyrathi Dragon. What does make it the Mystery Emblem is the chapter prior to this, Port Warren, also named after its location, a port town that is supposed to be neutral, but when Marv and his army set up camp here, they are attacked by forces from Grust. This is the chapter where Caesar and Rad join the army, and it's presumably best known for being the one where Shida can seduce one of the opponent's soldiers, Roger. Anyway, by the end of the chapter, the pursuit from the Grust soldiers becomes too much, and at the recommendation of non-playable advisor Malladus, Marv's army crosses the nearby bridge that leads to the Pyrathi Islands. Cool detail is that the maps of these two chapters actually line up perfectly, showing just how close Port Warren and the islands actually are to one another. It is, however, also a little strange when you learn what exactly the Pyrathi Islands are. It's not the type of location you'd expect to be connected to a bustling port town by bridge. While the opening CG from the DS remake gives us a better, more stylized look at the islands, which makes it appear a bit more contemporary and functional, the actual truth is that Pyrathi is long past its prime. And I'm talking very, very long. By the time Marv and forces arrive, the Pyrathi Islands are like a shadow of their former self. All that remains behind are the ruins of what once was, ruled over by the last remaining original inhabitant of Pyrathi, the fire dragon Manakith known as Manu, who's also the boss of the chapter. He resides in Pyrathi Castle, which is the building depicted on the opening CG, and is our only real primary source when it comes to the lore of this fallen kingdom. Because that is effectively what it is. A kingdom, with Manu as its leader, although it appears he is the only remaining original resident of the islands, as well the forces he sends after Marv and the Archanean League may all be listed as Pyrathian, implying they are natives. The truth is that they are all pirates. And yet, Manu has the nerve to call out your army and say you're trespassing on hallowed ground. My man, you have pirates fighting for you, who are you to talk? Anyway, it is implied that Manu and the Pyrathi Islands weren't always this unwelcoming to visitors. While it is stated the islands have always kept to themselves, not interacting much with the world beyond, we do know for a fact Bantu was able to freely visit the islands and lost his Firestone while there. Now, he is obviously a Manakith as well, which may have played a role in why he was allowed to visit the islands, although there is seemingly a human village, as well as a seemingly human-run armory here as well, so this might not be a race thing at all. We also know of another interesting visitor, although whether it is meant to be taken as canon is hard to say, as the game never confirms it, with the source instead being the notes of series creator Shozu Kaga, published all the way back in 1997. They state that another visitor of the islands included the mother of Ogma, who gave birth here, making Ogma a Pyrathian native, before being taken to Norda where he grew up. This history is never mentioned in any of the 4 Archanea games, making its canon status definitely dubious, but there is nothing to outright deconfirm it either, so I don't see a reason not to believe it, seeing as it comes right from the notes of the person who created this very world. Kaga's notes also mention Ogma's mother died on the Pyrathi Islands, but the cause is unknown. She might too have suffered the wrath of Manu, who has presumably been king of Pyrathi for as long as the islands have been populated, seeing as Manakiths have extraordinary long lifespans. While Manu is in essence just a one-off chapter boss, like Fire Emblem has so many, there is a lot more to him than your average bandit leader or evil army general. He almost is another Medeus, a Manakith king who builds his own kingdom to rule and live in. All other Manakiths Marv fights during his quest are loyal to Medeus and hail from Dol, where Medeus is king, but Manu doesn't. he isn't affiliated with Medeus at all. In fact, it is likely he doesn't even agree with the behavior of his fellow Manakete royal and isn't even a follower of the same beliefs. You see, just like Medeus, Manu does display a certain hatred for humans, but his way of dealing with it are quite different. Where Medeus' plans involve world domination at best and genocide at worst, Manu's idea is, as far as that's possible in this case, more healthy. Rather than eradicate humanity, he simply creates a kingdom that chooses not to interact with them. Now, over time, it seems like Manu has had to adjust that desire, seeing as his local Pyrathian army consists of humans, but seeing as how old this kingdom is, it is likely that at one point it was envisioned as being a humanless haven for Manaketes. It shows that while Manu doesn't take prisoners in his immediate anger towards the Archanean League when they enter his kingdom without approval, under the surface, he is no Medeus. And like I said, it appears that he doesn't even follow the same teachings. Now, this is never really brought forward in a very clear way in any of the Archanea games, merely alluded to, but it appears likely that Medeus is a follower of the teachings of Basilisk. As explained by Malleus, 3 Manakete clans once existed in Archanea. You had the Divine Dragons that followed Naga, which is what Tiki belongs to for example, the good guys, so to speak, the Mage Dragons of Basilisk, which is who Dol worship and who Medeus is loyal to, showing there is even a greater power above him, as well as a third mostly forgotten one, Salamander, deity of the Fire Dragons. Not only is Manu a Fire Dragon, not a Mage Dragon, he also mentions in the original Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light that he plans to sacrifice Marth and the rest to the deity Salamander, showing that he truly is not affiliated with Medeus at all. They're seemingly as different from one another as Naga and Medeus are. Make no mistake though, Manu is not a good man or anything. He clearly refers to the Archanean League as humans with derogatory words. His death quotes suggest he is blown away by the fact he was slain by anything not a dragon, and there is evidence to suggest his own followers don't even like him. Hidden away in the east of the map, in a shrine or palace, depending on the version of the game you play, is a Worm Slayer, a very interesting addition to a kingdom ruled by and made for dragons. The person who tells you about this is a villager, seemingly a human, a resident of the islands, who apparently doesn't care too much if their king falls. Now, obviously, from an out-of-game perspective, this is merely you being taught how to defeat Manaketes. After all, Manu will forever hold the title of being Fire Emblem's first ever enemy dragon. There are none before him, but plenty after that you definitely want to consider using the Worm Slayer for. And you'll need it too, because at the point of the game he arrives at, Manu is actually quite a strong boss, with serious stats as a result of his Firestone. But eventually, he is slain, and with that, the historic yet mysterious lineage of the Pyrathi Islands comes to an end. As soon as the chapter is over, Katria arrives to inform Marth of what's going on with Minerva, a much more urgent matter than discovering the secrets of the Pyrathi Islands, causing the Archanean League to leave and never return. The islands are never brought up again in Shadow Dragon, and like I said, do not appear in Mystery of the Emblem either, not even in Book 1. What happens to the islands with their king gone is a question I cannot answer, with our only ever second look at the location coming so much later. The locale is completely unrecognizable. In Fire Emblem Awakening, the land of Archanea is no more, in a literal sense at least, now listening to the name Elise. Technically, what used to be the Pyrathi Islands now fall under Elise, but true to their origin, the location remains secluded and rarely interacts with the rest of the world. The reason why is quite different though. No longer is Pyrathi an island group. Instead, the sea has completely retreated, leaving behind the seabed to form a desert known as the Desert Oasis, as seen in Paralog 14, Shadow in the Sands, the chapter where Lauron is recruited. We can see on the world map that this location aligns more or less with where the Pyrathi Islands were in Archanea, although the retreating sea has made it harder to spot than necessary. Also worth mentioning is that the Desert Oasis is often visited by bandits in search of a legendary goddess staff, found in a mirage village which only appears during sandstorms. Well, I definitely don't want to suggest this goddess staff harkens back to the Pyrathi origins. The fact remains that an age-old artifact has found its way to this ground once more, the only locale to house hidden treasure in all of Awakening even. Even then, it is likely to have come here after the fall of Manu, especially when you keep in mind the sheer number of years that have passed following his defeat, enough for the climate to change from island group to desert. Well, I definitely won't rule out that we will one day return to Archanea again, when the Fire Emblem game that started it all receives a modern remake. For the time being, I doubt we will learn more about the history and mysteries of the Pyrathi Islands. But in a way, we don't need to. The fact that mystery remains, that all this information and its surprising significance to the founding of Archanea is hidden away, is exactly what makes it so noteworthy. Just like Manu is Fire Emblem's first Manakete, the Pyrathi Islands is the series' first ever hidden lore. And no one can take that title away from it. Do you have any of your own theories regarding the mysteries of the Pyrathi Islands? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Fire Emblem content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.